No, keď sa povie Metaverse, mnohí si predstavia takú tú 3D náhlavnú súpravu, cez ktorú vidíte úplne iný virtuálny svet, v ktorom môžete bádať, môžete sa sociálne prepájať, hľadať kamarátov a čo ja viem, čo všetko ešte. Dá sa povedať, že to niektorí volajú ako tretí, štvrtý rozmer internetu. No, ak by sme sa nad tým mali zamyslieť, že by sme toto mali stále nosiť, tak neviem, či je toto práve, čo ľudstvo chce. V každom prípade môže to byť zaujímavé pre niektoré oblasti. Ako to teda súvisí s umelou inteligenciou a ako vôbec Metaverse s umelou inteligenciou prepojiť? To je téma prezentácie, ktorú máte možnosť si vypočuť v nasledujúcich minútach. A v tejto chvíli ja už vidím, že je pripravený pán Walter Pasquarelli, ktorý je odborným poradcom v oblasti stratégie umelej inteligencie, správy údajov a digitálnej transformácie. Nech sa páči.
Oh.
Please.
Thank you. All right. Yes, play.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real. Well, at least in contemporary terms, it is not. What if I were to tell you that I am not even a human being? Would you believe me? What is your perception of reality? Is it the ability to capture, process, and make sense of the information our senses receive? If you can see, hear, taste, or smell something, does that make it real? Or is it simply the ability to feel? I would like to welcome you to the era of synthetic reality. Now, what do you see? I am not Morgan Freeman.
Oh.
And what you see...
Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be here. So the video that you have just seen right now is an example of something called deepfake, which is part of the larger family of AI-generated synthetic media. Now, watching this video here, what did you think? How did that make you feel? And what does it tell us about the future of what we perceive as being real or not? This is part of a family of AI-generated content that we're seeing spreading out increasingly across the web, across our social spaces, across our social media, across our feed, across political discourse. And this is part of a technology and a trend that I call synthetic realities. Synthetic realities is the mix between AI-generated content integrated into virtual spaces. And this is what we're going to look at today, the marriage between these two technologies. Now, quickly about myself. I think someone already introduced me, but because I just speak English, I wasn't really sure what they were saying. But my name is Walter Pasquarelli. I work primarily with governments and businesses on AI strategy. I've worked with all of the large tech firms, both Meta on advising them on Metaverse policies. I've worked with Google on AI policy. And so I thought that this would be quite an interesting perspective to bring both experiences together into merging them into one single topic. I used to work at The Economist just until last week. I'm now a business owner, hooray, where I conduct research and advisory services on emerging technologies. In these presentations, there are a few things that I would like to look at with you. First of all is really understanding what is it when we talk about this new generative AI thing that everyone, I'm sure, has been seeing across their LinkedIn feeds and social media and other types of content. I would then like to look at briefly recapping what the Metaverse is. I think we've already had sufficient discussions on that. But then really understanding the marriage between these two technologies and how they will impact what we see, perceive, and experience when we go online. Right, so generative AI. We've all heard about this in this past year. The launch of ChatGPT from OpenAI, a massive change that sort of had a cataclysmic effect on the tech industry and the world economy as a whole. Now, how would typically define people artificial intelligence? Most of the conversation of having people, we're talking about efficiency. People think about robots, the Terminator, the future. But as a matter of fact, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're looking at statistics and computing power. Quite sobering. But for the purpose of this conversation, artificial intelligence should be the combination of essentially two words. The first one is artificial, so something that is non-human. And the second one is intelligence, which there's some disagreement on what it constitutes, but in this presentation we'll understand it as being the ability to complete tasks and solve problems. And by extension, artificial intelligence therefore shall be defined as a non-human ability to accomplish tasks and solve problems. Artificial intelligence, even though everyone's talking about it today, is actually quite old. It started out in the 1950s with Alan Turing asking the famous question, can machines think? And since then, there has been a number of developments, usually followed by a lot of hype where everyone got really excited about AI, and then some other periods where no discoveries were made and everyone was like, oh, this is the end of the field. But in particular, since 1997, when IBM's Deep Blue defeated the world champion of chess, Garry Kasparov, there has been another number of ways that have become more frequent and frequent and frequent. I would say one of the most interesting developments was in 2015 when Google DeepMind's AlphaGo defeated champion Lee Sedol in a game called Go, which was different from just chess, which is usually very mathematical, very logical. But this game required different traits, such as creativity or strategic thinking, which are traits that we understand as being fundamentally human. Now, this is not going to get too technical, I promise. This is very high level. Traditional AI research usually relied on limited data sets, limited models that were able to fulfill one specific task. So think about, you're a business that wants to predict how many products am I going to sell next year. You would have one product for that. You want to have another algorithm that tells you what you should watch on Netflix. You would have another algorithm for that. So separate systems that fulfill certain specific and limited tasks. Now what happened? Well, what happened was that a California-based research institute called OpenAI started saying, what if instead of just using limited amount of data sets, we now start increasing them drastically? What if we use all the data that we can find on the open internet? What if now we use the models that we used to have and we make them much larger and we increase them in size and we use maybe the computing power of 1 million computers? What would happen then? What happened is that we developed so-called foundation models. And these foundation models, different from the previous systems that were only able to develop one specific task, they are now able to fulfill multiple tasks, one to rule them all, so to speak. And that's what systems such as ChatGPT are based on. A tool that can write poetry, a tool that can write marketing copy, a tool that can write a new rap song, anything basically within one singular system. And that's been something that has had a massive impact on the AI field. And we've seen that with the rise of ChatGPT, but also other tools such as Midjourney. And something that's quite interesting, as some people don't know about, is that this became the fastest growing app of all time in 2023. And the reason for that was not that just companies started just buying the tool, but because people found it generally useful. And I think that's amazing. Now, there are a few different subsections of generative AI, and one is, of course, text-to-text models. Think of ChatGPT, that's the classical example, but there are some others that are, for example, used in data analysis. Another one,
knowing how many units we sold per
here.
day across all of these different products. Using formulas and functions would take a little bit of time, but here I simply need to phrase my question. Here, I will say how many units sold per day.
So you interact
and I want to
with,
see it as
okay,
a
that's
line
enough,
chart.
thank you.
Here, I'll press enter.
So you interact basically with like an Excel file just by saying how many units of something that are sold. So it's much more intuitive, it's much more accessible for someone who might not be a data analyst. Then there is this one, no need to play this one here, just want to show the picture, which is like a text-to-speech. So think of an avatar That's basically an image of myself, virtual, where I write something and say, hello, I'm here giving this presentation, and there's a video AI generated of me, like the one of Morgan Freeman, where I just say anything. That's implemented as well in music, by the way. And then there is, oh, no.
Hey.
Here we go. Then there is another area that is not yet fully developed, but that I think is going to have massive implications over the course of how we watch movies and of what we consume online. Let's play this video here.
Cyborgs and humans united in purpose, bound by the allure of the unknown, as they embark on an unforgettable expedition to unveil the secrets of the all-seeing eye in the Finnish snowy forest. As they brave the frozen expanse, they encounter the wonders and challenges of this untamed.
All right. Now, something that I would like to ask you. Do you recognize the actors? Do you recognize the voice? Do you recognize the place? No. None of this, what you have just seen, is real. None of the actors, none of the landscape, not even the voice. All of this is entirely generated by AI. And we see some of the reactions happening already nowadays in Hollywood, where the actors, the extras, are worried and are protesting, are saying, we fear that our jobs are going to be taken, and are going out on the streets because of technologies just like that. Now, the video here was created by a creator on YouTube, and it required no cost for actors, no cost for microphones, no cost for production, nothing. Everything was entirely for free. I guarantee you, wait 2 to 3, maximum 5 years' time, and we will be able to see the first Hollywood blockbuster generated maybe by some kid in a garage from a laptop just like the one that you and I have. And generative AI has created a lot of interest. This is just like the amount of quarterly volumes of investment reports that have been produced in the past year. So this is the Q4 of 2022, and then you see a rise of 2,040% in 2023. That's obviously quite a lot of interest. That's unusually high for any type of investment reports. But the thing to understand here, and that brings me to actually the bulk of the presentation, the main thing that I would like to discuss with you, is that generative AI and any of these technologies that we will be discussing today are not a standalone technology. When we talk about AI, it's not just AI, there you go, enjoy yourself, folks. But we actually combine it with different kinds of outlets. And one of them is the Metaverse. I should say right at the beginning, I'm not a huge fan of the term Metaverse. That's a term that has been pushed, of course, by some specific tech companies. A more objective, less laden term is spatial computing. So expect in the next couple of months, when Apple brings out their headset, to see a lot of competition between these kinds of terms, where Meta will call it Metaverse, Apple will call it spatial computing, to dominate the field and the conversation and the way that people talk about it. Right, so the Metaverse is quite interesting, especially in relation to AI. We've all heard about the Matrix, we've all seen Avatar, and some of you might have seen the movie Ready Player One, where we talk about these virtual spaces that create worlds that do not really exist, but that we dive into and feel incredibly real. And that's perhaps one of the key points, because what if you look at, for example, here, this gentleman, which I think is playing League of Legends from what I can see on here, and on the other hand, this movie called Ready Player One. What do you think is the difference? I'm just going to give you a couple seconds to think about it. It's the fact that it feels real. The fact that I might be in a space and I see people and I ascribe emotions to them, and that I'm not just standing in front of a screen with a little joystick and I basically can look to the left and right and I'm in the physical space. And that's perhaps the most important concept at all when we talk about the metaverse. the idea of presence, the idea that you feel you're there, specifically in a space and time. I might put on some headsets on, and I'm walking through New York, and it feels like I'm actually there. That's presence, and that's the most important term, I would say, when you hear any discussions about spatial computing or the metaverse. And because of that, if we think about spatial computing, let's define it as a collective digital space, bringing together virtual worlds in a way that generates presence, in a way that feels real. We are there in that moment. Now, what happens if we combine virtual reality together with AI-generated synthetic media? This is, by the way, this is not the real Tom Cruise. This is generated through AI, for the avoidance of doubt. The main intersection between these two technologies is the fact that generative AI is going to be used to create these worlds that we see in the metaverse. So think about, for example, we put the headsets on and we delve into an environment, which might be, for example, an office environment where we see the desks and where we can see a beautiful office. That is all going to be generated by AI. The avatars that we use in order to go into these worlds and that embody us digitally, they're going to be created by AI. The conversations that we might be having with people that don't really exist but are there in the metaverse, they will be generated through AI. Generative AI is the fuel and the engine that creates the content within the metaverse and spatial computing. And that's where the technology and the marriage of these technologies enables us to think in a way that perhaps we were not able to do before. Rather than having someone who designs and paints and draws the world, we will be able to develop them in a way that matches our imagination. These are all generated by AI as well. These are exactly about these kinds of like environments that we talk about. Synthetic reality is the mix between AI and spatial computing. Now, let's look at what I called the art of the possible. And that's basically a slightly nicer term for saying case studies. There are a few companies and organizations that are already integrating some of these technologies together, and I think that's quite interesting. That's a lot of text, by the way. I apologize for that. I should have formatted it. One of these companies, for example, Twilio. And what Twilio is doing, that they're using generative AI to understand all of the information that is out there in their company, and through a chatbot, they can then have some of their employees just ask questions. Hey, where can I apply for a vacation? Or hey, where is this form that I need to do in order to be able to do this? And it's particularly interesting because they also provide an environment where they can access it virtually. Think of a virtual office. So this is quite an interesting combination of these two things. Another one here is, for example, a company called Interior AI, which are basically a group of interior designers that want to provide their clients with a way to be able to basically think about how could I redesign my living room? How could I redesign my kitchen? They generate these environments through AI, and with a virtual headset, you can put it on and you feel like you're now in your new living room. And then there's, of course, Walmart and the retail sector. Walmart was one of the first companies that tried to really get into the field of the metaverse as soon as possible and create a shopping experience that will be more pleasant. So you could shop from home, you put these headphones on, and you go through Walmart and you buy whatever you need to get, and it's going to be delivered to you in real life. Now, this is all good and great and exciting, and this is all something that we can look forward to. But there are, of course, some issues. And the majority of these issues that we have here relate predominantly to the question of ethics and trust. This here is an image that was shared by Sam Altman about a year ago. Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI. And I don't really know what to think about it. I don't have an answer to whether I think this is good or bad. I don't have an answer to say this is terrible or not. And the reason for that is that in the tech environment, there is sort of the idea of developing these virtual worlds in order to create a reality that is better than the real one. And I think that's problematic on some level, because I'm thinking that my reality is better than the one of someone else is itself a privilege. But then who am I to deny someone who might have a very difficult life the opportunity to go somewhere else and experience something that might be more positive? A very difficult ethical question, in my opinion. Another one is a question of what is real and what is not real. Now, just a quick question. I would like to know, who of you thinks that the burger on the left is real? Please raise your hand. Okay. Who of you think that the burger on the right is the real one? Okay. Who isn't unsure? Okay. You want to know the real answer? Yeah, I forgot. And the reason for that is because by the time I was doing this presentation and I had gotten it ready, I could not already distinguish which one is real or not. So I'm very sorry about that. It's very unsatisfying, I know. Now, which one of these ones is real? Now, I know this is all funny. I know this is all great, and we're like, oh, look at that. McDonald's made a burger that is just consists of pixels and whatnot. But there is a question here that is obviously a little more fundamental, and that is, of course, when we're talking about elections. For years, we had been worried about the impact of AI-generated content on elections. So think about, there is a video of, like the one of Morgan Freeman. Imagine a president that is put out there and says some terrible things. And it could be either things that are controversial or insulting. But there was also a video going around of Biden, a fake video, I should say, of Joe Biden announcing a nuclear strike, right? And everyone can kind of see it's fake today, but this is going to change eventually. What I can say is watch the US elections unfold in 2024. By that time, the technology is going to be sufficiently mature to be able to have a significant impact on how we conduct politics nowadays. And that brings us, of course, to the solutions. It's fun to talk about the problems and sort of think about, okay, what is wrong with the world, but ultimately we have to fix those things. And there are a few things that I think are quite important. The first one is about privacy. So if I'm in this virtual world and everything that I do, every movement I make, everywhere I look at, where I look up and down, whether I look to the left or to the right, where I grab my hand for something, how much time I spend looking at a particular piece of content, all of this is information that is incredibly valuable and with which we can do things like, for example, conduct therapy, treat people. But there is also a real risk for this data to be provided to marketing companies, to advertising companies, and then being used for political manipulation purposes. And another question is then, of course, the topic of governance. Who controls the metaverse? Who controls an environment that is maybe generated through my own fantasy, but ultimately is built and operated by some of the large platform economies? And the other thing is the topic of accountability. There have been cases, for example, of virtual spaces where women were groped by an avatar, so cases of sexual harassment. And there were some people who were saying, well, it just happened in the metaverse. And my answer is no. It's not true, because these issues that are happening nowadays in the real world will not stop at the gates of virtual reality. And then there's a question of content moderation, which is, of course, what you see. Who should determine what you see, particularly if it feels real? Now, because I'm here and I came all the way from London, I have two presents for you. One is a short course on the metaverse. Another one is about ChatGPT and prompting. So it's about each of these. They're completely for free, so you can go and download them. Other than that, I would like to express my gratitude for having them. My understanding is that we should be able to have a Q&A right now, for which I have saved some time. and I shall be here to answer any of your questions. Right, I think we have a roaming microphone going around. Who has any questions whilst I'm here? Please raise your hand. Yes, the gentleman over there. Oh yeah, we have a microphone coming right over to you.
Which of the AI tools are free to use from those that you mentioned?
I sense someone wanting to do his homework. I'm joking. Well, depends for what. There are a few, for example, the text-to-text ones. ChatGPT, for example, is obviously for free. There's another one called Bard, B-A-R-D from Google, that is also for free. When it comes to generating images, there is one called Midjourney, which is M-I-D-J-O-U-R-N-E-Y. So Midjourney. And when it comes to the video that I showed you, that's at the moment it's my favorite tool. It's called Runway. So R-U-N-W-A-Y. And you can try it out for free. You can put in either your own images or you can give it a prompt via text and it generates videos. There's both a free version as well as a paid one. I've never used a paid one, but those are some tools that you can experiment with. And I think if you learn to use them well, you can make yourself very valuable in the future economy.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? Yes, you, sir. Excellent question. I think if we look right now at the immediate risks, when we talk about Gen AI, the immediate risks are, in my opinion, about disinformation. And they can happen at 3 layers. 2. No, 3. 3 layers. The first one is the individual one. So the fact that someone can use my face, copy-paste it somewhere else, and make me say or do things that I actually never did. And a huge issue there is pornography, particularly towards women, which is a hate crime, effectively, right? That's something that we've seen where the faces of either actresses or also like private people were stolen and copy-pasted on pornographic footage, and it's basically harms them psychologically and so on. So that's one. But it's also about me saying or doing things as a man that might be incriminating me in some form. There is then a second layer, which is organizational levels. And organizational levels could be I'm a business owner or I'm an employee, and I get someone calling me who sounds exactly like my CEO and says, "Kay, can you transfer $100,000 to this account?" And because all you need is 3 seconds of someone's voice in order to regenerate it, that's a risk that is quite real, right? And then there's the final layer, which is sort of the one about the wider ecosystems in society. And here we're talking about the ethical risk there, in my opinion, is disinformation in political and election processes. So think about if there is an election and you see I was about to say Donald Trump saying something terrible, but say another candidate saying something terrible, and that makes you sort of doubt what you can trust them to see. But I think the issue is that there's going to be so much of that fake content that people will be like, well, who do I trust? And if you cannot trust anything or anyone, or you always have to second guess and question, then that undermines the process that we have in our democratic institutions. Now, here we've described the problem. Let's think about the solution. There are a few solutions out there that are happening at the moment. One is watermarking. So for example, we have a piece of AI-generated content, and we include watermarks, so a way to assess whether this piece of content is real or not. So when an image is generated, it basically says AI or non-AI generated. And it's not an image that is sort of a watermark that is on the picture, but it's one that it's in the pixels. And because it's in the pixels, we can assess it relatively easily through a machine. The second one is disclosure. So platforms such as TikTok are now, for example, offering content creators to say, well, this piece was generated by AI or not. But my understanding is that it's still voluntary, and I think that's not going to do anything. The third one, then, are detection tools. Detection tools are, for example, I show them the video of Morgan Freeman, and I put it through a tool, and it can say, well, I can say with 90% certainty that this video was made by AI. But these tools are highly unreliable. So they're not precise. If someone says we have a tool like that, don't trust them, because it's very difficult. Even OpenAI had, I think, a tool that they tried to detect text that was made for ChatGPT, and it had an accuracy of just, I think, 27%. So they pulled it down. Very unreliable. And then there's probably a fourth approach that is going to be the regulatory environment. And that's, for example, if I'm a user and I create something with AI that is crazy, and I put it out there and it goes viral, that I can actually be punished for that. Right now, there's not a real blueprint for that, and that's quite shocking if you think about it. The main thing on which we can be held to account is on intellectual property infringements at the moment, but that's going to change. In all likelihood, it's going to be a combination of these. So it's not just going to be one thing or the other. There's no silver bullet. It's not that we say, aha, this is the solution, but it's going to be a combination of these.
Thank you very much.
Time's up.
Yeah. Yeah. OK, ďakujeme pekne.
Thank you.